Greetings, welcome back to my channel. I don't know why Brandon Tucker decided to put himself in this position. I have to give a fair and balanced take on this situation. Brandon Tucker was almost stabbed yesterday on the No Jumper podcast, right? If you took a break from YouTube for the last few months, you would be surprised by what is taking place right now because Brandon Tucker is a conscious commentator on YouTube. He has various videos speaking about social issues in America, race, class, um, issues taking place on the continent, and generally, he addresses world events through the lens of a Pan African outlook. This is the best way that I can describe what he's been doing on his channel when it was known as Pan Africanism Strikes Back. I noticed a few weeks ago, or maybe 2 months ago, he changed the name of his channel to Defiant with Brandon Tucker, right? So when I saw this rebranding, I knew that there was something at work. Something was about to be revealed. And what basically took place is that Brandon Tucker decided to go and work with Adam22 and the No Jumper podcast, right? The No Jumper podcast deals with hip hop issues, um, LA street gang politics, prison politics, and basically some reprobate behavior. You know, the No Jumper show is now like Jerry Springer for hip hop, right? And I think Adam22 has been doing a masterful job of setting black people against each other, facilitating conflict. I wouldn't say he's inciting the conflict, but he's facilitating it by bringing certain personalities together that represent rival gangs. And so I was surprised to see that a person like Brandon Tucker, who has a certain outlook, would engage himself in this environment. But apparently, Brandon Tucker is from Los Angeles, if I'm not mistaken, and so he seems to be fairly familiar with the characters um, and the narratives that are at play in the LA gang situation. Basically, he was almost stabbed yesterday. I think it's being claimed that almighty suspect, the individual who brought the knife on the podcast, actually spat on Brandon, right? If you've been paying attention to No Jumper, spitting is not something that is uncommon. We know that 16 shot him, went on the No Jumper podcast and spat on somebody, right? And so it was against this backdrop that the podcast took place yesterday. Adam22 wasn't present, but he had a surrogate in the person of Lush. All right, we know that Lush has been fired like 3 times. He's now on his fourth run with No Jumper, fourth attempt at becoming a contributor for a consistent period of time. And what Lush has done, he arranged a meeting between Brandon and Almighty Suspect. We know that if you've been paying attention to the show, there was one episode where Brandon and Almighty Suspect exchanged fighting words, and basically they wanted to go outside and have like a friendly squabble and I guess resolve it in the LA cultural way, you know. But Adam22 caught wind of this situation, the spitting. He caught wind of the knife being brought onto the set, and he has a few choice words for Almighty Suspect as a result of it.
I have an announcement. Many of you are probably expecting this. As of today, Almighty Suspect will no longer be a host on No Jumper. For anyone who's living in a hole in the ground, there was a confrontation last night between Brandon, aka Bucci Bear, aka Dark Brandon, and Almighty Suspect that resulted in both spit flying and a knife being pulled out. Both of these are infractions that I fear we just cannot tolerate as a business. You know, many times over the past couple of years, I've looked back at the Kelpie incident and I have felt like I was a little too lenient. Like, I feel like that incident.
As far as the KLP situation, the same individual, Almighty Suspect, got up in the middle of a show and started to attack KLP, who was a guest on the show for that particular episode.
And even though we managed to skate, essentially, because we got Kelpie to sign off on suing us, I think it was extremely lenient of us to not fire Sus at that time. And I'm not going to lie, there's been a couple times since then, in particular with the whole Jalise thing, where it really felt like he was on the border of...
You stop Adam right there. So basically, he's fired, Almighty Suspect. He goes on to say that it was for business reasons. He said that it's not good for their brand. He's saying that basically he will no longer allow Almighty Suspect on the show as a result of this. But as I said, I don't think this was a good fit for Brandon, even though he seems to be able to hold his own. It seems like he was actually trying to take the show in a different direction by adding some intelligent commentary, by adding some informed opinions to the show. They actually had a debate between Brandon and a white supremacist, and I guess they were attempting to utilize some of his background in the Pan-African struggle to enhance the content on No Jumper. I don't think Almighty Suspect is going to be fired indefinitely. And I've said that because Lush is another contributor who's violated Adam on more than one occasion, and he found himself being rehired and brought back in some capacity. But something that disturbed me was the attempt by Lush to portray Brandon as being like a double agent or like an agent provocateur, right? Lush made this comment that prior to coming to No Jumper, um, Brandon was actually engaged in a conflict with Tariq Nasheed. Now, I found it to be strange that Lush is well versed in like the Pan-African side of YouTube and actually knows about the Tariq Nasheed beef with Brandon. I don't know if he's been in dialogue with Tariq Nasheed, or maybe he just did some research and saw the videos of him having a conflict with Tariq Nasheed. But ultimately, what I would say is that the situation could have went even further left. Somebody could have actually been hurt. All of these conversations that they were having about fighting and threatening each other and questioning each other's manhood obviously would have led to a conflict at some point, you know. But family, let me know your thoughts in the comments below about this situation. One love. Viewers of the show can attest to the fact that Lush is Adam's personal punching bag at the No Jumper podcast, right? I've never seen anyone so willing to endure disrespect and embarrassment as Lush. And Adam even accused Lush of setting up the situation because of a prior conflict that he and Almighty Suspect had on the show. Apparently, he and Almighty Suspect had a fight. The fight didn't go very well. I think Lush is still walking with a limp. He's not very balanced on his feet as a result of this fight. And all of this can be attributed to that incident. And so Adam is speculating that he put these two polarizing individuals together so that they would have had some kind of conflict.
Was an easy decision. That being said, I feel like you're trying to pivot away from the fact that you wanting to get suspect out the paint so bad that you set him up in an environment in which you knew that he would resort to violence because you still hold a lingering animosity towards suspects because of the way that he
laid you out.
knocked you on your ass.
It's actually quite the opposite.
So, I mean, if you can just hear the exchange, what Adam is saying to him, he's even making light of the fact that he was punched. So, with friends like these, who needs enemies,
This is what they say. Black men have low impulse control. Black men are unable to blah, 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 blah. And that was kind of what Brandon's intention was when he came over here as an agent of chaos, similar to the agent of chaos that he was in the Tariq Nasheed orbit. You feel me?
But to call Brandon an agent of chaos when even like
I think it's a perfect description of him.
Okay, but even when the show started, from like my perspective, like if the goal was to have them two sit down, talk out their issues, and have like a neutral field, even like when like they began like to argue, you could like clearly tell from like your laugh and laugh and it felt like, oh, okay, this felt like a pile on Brandon, and it kind of felt like okay, is he coming around because y'all enjoy him, or is he coming around because you felt like let's get one up on Brandon today? And that's why.
This is a good point from Flacco. I'm gonna ignore the video that he posted earlier today, talking about the dimensions of Brandon's body. Some of the things that he was saying earlier today call his man card into question. But what he's saying here is a very important point. When all of this was taking place, Lush, who is now trying to portray himself as being some neutral mediator, was cackling and laughing and basically egging this situation on. Right? It seems to me that Lush saw two individuals that he was threatened by and wanted to basically set them on a collision course. Right? He didn't have to really do anything. His inaction was effectively bringing it about. Okay? But the claim that Lush made that Brandon is an agent of chaos is very inappropriate for this situation, right? Especially on the No Jumper podcast. When people are on the No Jumper podcast openly talking about robberies and burglaries that they committed back in the day, shootings, etc., nobody calls them an agent of chaos. But in some ways, I can kind of hear where he's coming from, because in some cases, Brandon sort of like turned up the intensity of the conflict by making certain assertions. He was responding to Almighty Suspect with some hurtful words. But I think it was basically a volley of insults, and nobody can really be said to be right or wrong, But family, let me know your thoughts about this situation. Do you believe that Brandon was right? Do you believe that Almighty Suspect was right? Let me know your opinions in the comments below. One love.